Welcome back to Tempo Storm's deck introduction series featuring the resurgence of one of Hearthstone's oldest archetypes, Control Paladin. The archetype faced a rocky start in the Year of the Mammoth, with the loss of Anything Can Happen as the only viable Paladin deck at the time. Even so, the Murloc Paladin combo deck never found its way past Tier 3, leaving players at the turn of the Hearthstone year uncertain about the viability of Control Paladin on the ladder. With the class additions of Hydrologist, Stonehill Defender, Spikeridged Steed, and Sunkeeper Tarim, and some much needed neutral anti-aggro tech, the jungles of Un'Goro breathed new life into the archetype, and to the class as a whole. Now that players such as BB Gungun, Ostkaka, and Nagato have had the opportunity to explore Un'Goro, they discovered a place for Control Paladin on the ladder as a mid to high tier 2 deck with the ability to compete at the highest levels of the game. To pilot Control Paladin on the ladder, you first have to understand that the deck ultimately relies on clearing waves of minions and responding to large threats to establish a dominant late game, in the form of Ragnaros the Light Lord and Tyrion Forgery. Both cards are strong enough to make reaching the late game worthwhile, with the deck doing whatever it can to reach that point with a host of recruits, weapons, and powerful control spells. This strategy is made possible by three core elements: access to devastatingly cost-effective board clear, the ability to neutralize large threats, and to access to a wide range of healing. With a hero power that generates silver hand recruits, the deck is able to drag out games long enough to outvalue their opponents. Powerful as this may seem, a great deal of your strategizing will depend on how you survive the early and mid stages of the game and what resources you spend to do so. You will often need to use resources to their greatest value for each matchup in order to outlast your opponent. Early game minions for Control Paladin are played more often for generating resources than developing a sustainable board presence. With this in mind, you'll need to decide the best time to use the Doomsayer, or when it's appropriate to clear board with equality, or how long to hold onto a weapon before equipping it. Much of these early game decisions will be tricky, but with planning and the understanding of each matchup, you'll be able to do more than shut out board-centric aggro decks. As long as you can reach turn 6, playing Spikeridged Steed will regularly win you the game unless the opponent uses Silence or has some other means of removing the buff and Death Rattle. Lastly, don't forget that Control Paladin doesn't have the ability to apply burst damage. Your win condition is to control the board and keeping out of range of burn to outvalue your opponent into submission. Control Paladin can be one of the harder decks to navigate on the rocky road to legend, with no obvious win condition that abuses a wide board state like Aggro Druid and Token Shaman, or access to large burst damage like Freeze Mage and Pirate Warrior. However, with what the archetype lacks in a win condition, it makes up for with a wide range of tools to combat most tier 1 aggro decks that tend to dominate the meta. For your mulligan, it's important to be aware of the role Pyro Equality serves in your deck. Just because the two are strong together doesn't mean you should mulligan aggressively for both pieces. Control Paladin needs to contest the board more proactively to secure its late game win condition. Mulligan actively for Hydrologist, Doomsayer, and Rallying Blade in every matchup for early game control. Hold on to Pyromancer and Galakakrawla for aggro matchup while saving Stonehill Defender and Acolyte of Pain for control in mid-range decks. Some versions of Control Paladin use N'Zoth the Corruptor to re-summon Tyrion later in the game, and sometimes more than one thanks to Stonehill Defender and Hydrologist's access to Redemption and Getaway Kodo. This is typically at the expense of removing a copy of Primordial Drake and another ladder tech card to make room for Infested Tauren and Cairn Bloodhoof to maximize N'Zoth value. Adding N'Zoth should be reserved as a response to an influx of Jade Druid and other mid-ranger control decks where the summoning of more than one Tyrion Forge Ring is more likely to secure a win condition against these matchups. Otherwise, if facing aggro matchups where the game is decided before turn 10, holding onto your Galakakrawla and Primordial Drake will improve your win rate in those matchups. Decisive tech cards in response to accurate reads in the meta was what gave Nagato an edge on his climb to the highest ranks of Legend with the Control Paladin archetype. Finally, most Shaman decks rarely play Hex nowadays, relying on Devolve to get through taunts and buffed minions. As the Control Paladin player, you can abuse this by holding onto your Spikeridged Steed for the turn after Devolve if you can afford to. By playing it on a Wisp or any other 0-mana minion, the buff and taunt will be immune to another Devolve, forcing the Shaman to either have Hex or grind through 13 health with damage and minions. Awareness of your opponent's ability to respond to your own threats will provide you more opportunities to strategize your resources until you're ready to drop your big threats which is what playing a control deck is really all about. Though the deck is geared in this meta as an anti-aggro deck, the wide range of tools Control Paladin carries has the potential to beat most meta decks. If you're playing this deck for the first time, don't be discouraged by early setbacks. It takes time to learn what mulligans and options are available to you, but once you become comfortable playing the deck, you'll have another powerful deck in your arsenal to climb the ladder to the highest levels of the game. To see how this archetype fits in the current meta, be sure to check out our most recent Tempo Storm meta snapshot. And as always, please leave a like on the video if you enjoy it, and join the discussion in the comments below. Finally, don't forget to subscribe to stay up to speed with all of Tempo Storm's news and Hearthstone content.